You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Going back through the Chicago Bears' loss to the Baltimore Ravens on tape helped make it a little bit more clear where this Bears offense struggled and couldn't put up enough points, and how this Bears defense really blew it at the end to help the Ravens come back in and ultimately win this game. This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm an analyst for Pro Football Focus, and I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook, join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk, and make sure that you're subscribed to the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. On the show today, we're going back through Bears versus Ravens, particularly looking at the play calling from Matt Lazor here with Justin Fields through the first half and kind of find out where they were struggling to score points on those drives, and then what was a little bit different for Andy Dalton at first and maybe a little bit toward the end there to help that offense finally get some points on the board. Then we'll go through that last drive by the Baltimore Ravens, how the Bears defense squandered so many yards and made the touchdown look a little bit too easy, and why it kind of felt like there was one Bears secondary player in particular who was at fault over and over again on that last drive, but certainly not all his fault throughout this game. And then we look more specifically at coaching, the little things that you can kind of point more directly to the coaching staff above anything else as to, again, holding the team back, not necessarily being the sole reason they lost, but another piece on top of this mounting evidence as to why Matt Nagy's tenure in Chicago is not destined to last too much longer. But I want to start with the offense because I was really curious about the play calling in particular, just kind of going back through the tape. And I will say, NFL Game Pass, the NFL's official source of tape, you pay a subscription fee to rewatch the games. They're supposed to have coaches' film available, they say, within 24 hours from the game being over. That has never been the case all season. The product has gone downhill. And so we're still mostly working off of broadcast with a couple of back channel all 22 sources I have here and there, but wasn't able to kind of go through all of it through the all 22. Certainly I was able to get some pieces here and there, but a couple of plays not as easy. And so when I'm looking at the offensive play calls, it's usually pretty easy to get a sense of what the route concept was, and certainly the running plays are a little bit easier to see, but occasionally some stuff is happening off the screen. So that's sort of my disclaimer to say I'm not always going to be perfect on identifying what every play is just off of the broadcast, but like going through the drives, it was 4 drives in the first half plus 1 in the second half before Justin Fields got hurt. And I think I kind of found where I think Fields started to get hurt, and or at least where the injury started becoming more and more of a factor on that first drive in the second half. But kind of going through, I was curious, when Dalton came in the game, they scored so quickly and they scored at the end. I was wanting to see how things compared with Fields to Dalton. And I certainly think, with Bill Lazor as the play caller, as far as we know still, there was good variety on some of these, on a lot of these drives, especially to start. The opening play was, it looked like read option, but it was more designed for the quarterback to keep it. It's called an arc read, where you kind of have the tight end peel out in front and leave the first blocker to be option, but you're really kind of setting that play up for a quarterback to keep it. And running play goes well. Then, they go to a quick passing stick concept. Then they hand it off to David Montgomery on what's called split zone. It's an inside zone play with a tight end running to the backside. Very common running play that you're going to see throughout the Bears offense. You're going to hear me say that a good 7 or 8 times here, going through all the different plays. Split zone running game's working well. They get the play action going. They run a post wheel. Justin Fields hits the wheel, I believe, down the sideline for a first down. And then you go into the wildcat with David Montgomery at the quarterback spot, which can be gimmicky, but has kind of worked in certain situations here and there. Okay. Then the Bears run the toss to the left with Jeremy Grant, the wide receiver, in the backfield. That one, again, works fairly well. I mean, they're able to get the running game going every time they went to it, more or less, to start the game there and kind of throughout that first half. Then they go to a curls concept, and Justin Fields throws it away because there's pressure in the pocket. Actually a smart throwaway where he kind of jumps and chucks it into the stands, a play where nothing was open and the blitz was starting to get home there. He had some time, but just not anything get open. It was that was one of those plays that Tony Romo pointed out in the broadcast as being kind of a smart Justin Fields play to throw it away there. Then you get to 3rd and 5, just outside or in or around the red zone there, and they run the shotgun toss to David Montgomery. I mean, I hate that play call anywhere on the field, and when it works, you don't criticize it, and I get that, and so I'm trying not to be too critical and too picky of that, but it goes nowhere, and they didn't have numbers on that play. They moved Montgomery to that side, and the defense all shifted, so there was a bunch of defenders on that right side, and really no one to the left side. And it was from the moment he snapped the ball, there was no room for David Montgomery to run the ball, and so that whole drive had good variety, right? They were running the ball, maybe not as much as you might like, but it was still working. Justin Fields hit a nice play downfield on the post or on the wheel route on the post wheel that was open. He was running the ball well. The running game was going. He hit a couple of quick throws there, but then I hate the 3rd and 5 draw. And then the field goal kicker misses, and that's not Matt Nagy's fault. That's not anybody's fault, but the kicker, although you could argue that maybe Nagy threw off his rhythm by having him attempt the 65-yarder at the end of the Steelers game the week before. But regardless, you go on to the next play and you get the next drive, you get read option, you get a play action flood where there's a miscommunication with Mooney, and then there's a miscommunication on the 3rd down throw there. It's kind of a double curl with an in across the middle, and it was behind Goodwin, but it was outside leverage against the cornerback, and Fields kind of threw it to the outside, but Goodwin wouldn't go outside, and you wonder, is that Fields reading it wrong? Is that a receiver and a quarterback not on the same page? And there were a few of that too, like where there was, I think on the 4th drive, he threw it just a little bit outside for Darnell Mooney, and he wasn't able to bring it in, and you don't know, is that the quarterback being inaccurate, or is that the quarterback reading the right spot and putting it where he thinks it needs to go, and the wide receiver not agreeing with him for whatever reason? And who's right and who's wrong, we don't know for sure, but you can kind of see what Fields' idea was there, and you can also kind of see what the wide receiver's idea was there, and we might not ever know. But I just think we got some good variety from these play calls. It wasn't just the same curl flats. And I give Bill Lazor and to some extent Matt Nagy credit for being able to execute that. But those drives, they always just seem to stall. There was the 3rd and 5 toss and the field goal miss on the first drive. Then it was miscommunication between Goodwin and Fields on the 3rd down on the second drive. Then on the 3rd drive, it's the strip sack where Jason Peters got beat in 2 seconds. I mean, Fields tried to step up, but Fields was beat to the inside. Fields did not take an extra deep drop. That was bad offensive line on that 3rd down play. And of course, blame Fields 100% for fumbling, right? If he takes the sack, I blame the offensive line just for the sack, right? It's the offensive line's fault that the 3rd down play was unsuccessful. It's Fields' fault that he fumbled it. He needs better ball security in the pocket. I'm perfectly fine blaming Fields on that one. 4th drive, the last drive of the first half, they get some running game going. The couple of passes are off there. They get a sack on 3rd down that's bailed out by defensive holding, but the offense had 7 blockers, and the defense blitzed 5, and they had a delayed blitzer come free to Justin Fields. We're in week 11, and the offensive line can't pick up these blitzes properly, even with extra blockers. And I put some of that blame on Sam Mustipher, the center, just not being able to do consistently a good enough job there. On that one, they were bailed out by the defensive holding, so the drive stays alive, but then Darnell Mooney drops it on 3rd down. Fields had missed him on the previous pass, but then on 3rd down, Mooney's kind of going across the middle of the field, and it's a little bit low, but he goes down to scoop it. It's not at the ground, and Mooney still can't hold on to it. It's a Mooney drop, incomplete. Bears have to punt there. It was 3rd down, and just they're unable to kind of finish those drives for little things. Fields was inaccurate on some of them, but not exactly on the 3rd downs per se, but it was miscommunications, blitz pickups, pass protection, and then some Fields inaccuracies as well. But it certainly is not all on Fields, and I don't know that it was all on play calling, because I do blame play calling kind of on that shotgun toss to the right. The field goal miss isn't anybody's fault. So it's all these different sort of combination of things. Even on the last play of the first drive of the second half, the last drive for Justin Fields, false start on the first play, then they run the ball in the split zone. They run a kind of a weird quarterback draw thing, and Fields is sacked. They get a 3rd and long. Fields throws a really nice pass to Mooney on a flood concept to convert the 3rd and long. And that's the thing that sticks out to me is yes, some of those drives stalled in part because of Fields, in part because of other players making mistakes, but Fields had some really nice throws in there. The post wheel on the first drive, I think he put in the right spot on an incompletion on the second drive on a flood play action concept to Mooney across the middle of the field. He had a nice hit on a crossing route on the middle of the field on a max protect. I think it was either Mooney or Cole Kmet over the middle of the field for 10 to 12 yards. He's hitting these more difficult downfield throws, and then it seems like things are just falling apart in some of these critical situations. And then the last play he was on the field for, 3rd and 11, he scrambles at the middle. He has David Montgomery as a potential check down. He probably should have thrown it there. Matt Nagy made the good point that, if he pumps fakes and the linebacker bites on it, he probably scrambles for the first down, and it's instincts and playmaking, and you trust the ball in your own hands as a quarterback who's made a lot of those plays before. I'm not going to kill him too much on that one, but there's some blame to be had there on Fields. I don't think it's totally Fields' fault that they couldn't score points on any of those drives, but there was some blame on Fields, but there was enough positive there, I think, that really, I don't know if they completely made up for it, but it definitely gave you enough reason to not totally feel like it's all Fields' fault. It's just this combination of some Fields, some pass protection and blitz pickup, some wide receiver drops, some weird play calling, a missed field goal in there, and just wide receivers and quarterbacks not being on the same page. And it makes it kind of a complicated fix for this Bears offense. I think it's a little bit more simple on the Bears defense, where they played better for most of the game, but definitely choked on that last drive. We'll go through some of those plays for the Ravens, what went wrong that allowed this Bears defense to kind of collapse and the Ravens to come down and score at the end of the game, next on Locked On Bears. The Baltimore Ravens moved the ball way too easily on that last drive against the Chicago Bears defense. And unfortunately, it felt like a lot of the blame ended on the shoulders of Kindle Vildor. And I feel bad because he's a young cornerback, and he'd shown some signs of improvement over, his 10 starts now this season, but boy, back to back kind of bad plays for him on that drive that let the Ravens drive down and score. And now, of course, when there are 11 guys out on defense, you could argue, well, the pass rush could have been better, could have sacked him here, could have made a play there, could have stopped the run there, right? It's not like solely Kindle Vildor's fault that the Chicago Bears lost. But when you go through that last drive, right away, there's the defensive pass interference where Kindle Vildor's got the guy covered, right? Deion Bush is over the top. He drops in what would have been an easy interception that would have been negated by the penalty anyway, but he's covered, and he still grabs onto, I believe it was Sammy Watkins, I think, was the wide receiver on that play, and it gives him a free 20 yards or whatever downfield on the pass interference. And it's dude, he's already covered. You have a safety helping you. There's no separation. Why are you even getting up on him so early? I mean, you can wait for the ball to get there. I mean, it's a tough play, and it can be, everything's moving fast, and he's a speedy wide receiver, and it's a key situation. I'm trying to give Vildor either benefit of the doubt or sympathy. I don't know what it is, but man, it's a really bad pass interference penalty to take in that key situation of the game. Then right after, you have the open wheel route down the sideline where I think it's Duvernay. It's a post wheel concept where the outside receiver runs a post, slot receiver runs a wheel kind of behind it. And I can't tell without the L22 whether the Bears are in a cover 3 cloud to the field side away from the route, or if it's cover 6. But either way, it's a route concept that is supposed to be good against that coverage. And so I'm not going to kill Vildor without the all-22 to see how much space he really gave up there, because when you're the outside cornerback, that post route breaking to the inside is what you're supposed to kind of follow first. But you want a smart veteran cornerback to follow it at first, pass that off, and then get back to the outside in anticipation potentially of that wheel route, to kind of have your eyes, not only looking at the quarterback, but seeing the full field in front of you and seeing that player sort of in your peripheral vision, that Ravens jersey working to the outside while you're going to the inside of covering that post receiver. And Vildor's not there in the second year of his career. And I'm trying to give him, again, benefit of the doubt there. So it was a tough concept for him to cover, but it was also his responsibility to get over there and cover it. And so I give the offense some credit. It was a good concept, a good read, a good throw, but also attacking Kindle Vildor and just not great coverage by any means. Then the next play is Tyler Huntley kind of under some pressure and scrambling up the middle, goes down after 2 yards. It's a good stop by the defense. But, after a 20-yard pass interference and a 20-yard completion or whatever to Duvernay on the post wheel. All of a sudden, the Ravens are already basically in the red zone at that point. So you're already kind of in a bad spot, but at least there's an opportunity here or I think they were just outside the red zone, but there's an opportunity for the defense to at least try and hold them to the field goal. I mean, you have enough of a lead that a field goal, they're going to need more than a field goal. You're up 4. So, right, the red zone is not a killer spot to be in, and a good stop on the scramble. Then Huntley on the next play, I think, checks down to a running back. He's under some pressure and just has to dump it off to Freeman. Houston Carson's in coverage, steps up, misses the tackle behind the line of scrimmage, then chases him down and makes a tackle for a gain of 6. So, what potential for a stop there, but blame Houston Carson for missing the tackle, but 6 yards isn't devastating, but it's not good coverage as a result. Next play is the offensive holding. Backs the Ravens up to 3rd and 12 outside of the red zone. Good spot for the defense to be in. But Ravens come out, 3 receivers right, 1 left. They take the outside receiver. They motion him in to form that bunch formation. All 3 wide receivers on that side in kind of a tight alignment, all close together. But it wasn't as though the Ravens did like a no huddle, right? It wasn't like quick to the line of scrimmage. Don't let the defense figure out what they want to do. They came lined up. Then they motioned the receiver in. And for whatever reason, Kindle Vildor was trying to communicate with Tashawn Gibson and the slot cornerback on there's 3 receivers over there. There's 3 of us in coverage. Who are we all going to cover when they're all bunched? It's man coverage. And so what you don't want to do is get picked off, right? I mean, you don't want them to cross and end up having 2 guys run into each other. So typically what you do in that situation, and Matt Nagy talked about it in his press conference, like they have rules. And most often what the rules will be is you'll say, okay, if there's 3 wide receivers and 3 defenders, who's ever on the outside will take whatever wide receiver goes outside in man coverage. So we're not deciding pre-snap, I've got this guy, you've got that guy. We'll say, no. Whoever comes outside, I'm going to take him in man coverage. Whoever goes inside, then our most inside player is going to take the inside guy. And then the third player is going to take the third guy, right? So then no one's running into each other. Everyone's got sort of a designated area that they're going to take the man coverage for. But for whatever reason, Kindle Vildor and Tashawn Gibson aren't able to communicate that properly off of the motion. And Vildor and Gibson cover the same player who's running a shallow crossing route. And it's 3rd and 12. And that shallow crossing route is about 2 yards past the line of scrimmage. So even if no one covered him, he's only going to catch it about 2 yards past the line of scrimmage. And then there's going to be other defenders covering other players that can step up and try and make the tackle. But instead, 2 players cover him, and nobody covers the wide receiver running the vertical on the outside, the route that actually threatens you the most in a 3rd and 12 situation. And Kindle Vildor was the most outside cornerback, and typically whichever cornerback or defensive back in general is on the outside is then also going to be the player who covers the most outside wide receiver. And so that's where Vildor gets the blame on a play like that. I mean, you have to know where your biggest threats are. And Sammy Watkins running a vertical route is your threat. And he thought Tashawn Gibson was supposed to take it, but you're going to make your safety cover the outside vertical route. I mean, that's the cornerback's spot. It just didn't, the communication there doesn't make sense to me on how it's not Kindle Vildor's fault. And Nagy even kind of said, yeah, it kind of looks like Kindle, but they have rules there. And maybe their rules are supposed to be different, where Vildor is supposed to follow that, but it doesn't seem common that way. And so it puts them down inside the 5-yard line. Then they hand it off up the middle for the rushing touchdown. And on that rushing touchdown, it's frustrating to me that Roquan Smith is completely out of position on the rushing play. And yes, the Ravens have the ball at the 5-yard line, and they're probably going to score there no matter what. And so I'm not going to blame the loss on Roquan Smith. I'm not going to say Roquan Smith had a bad game. He had 16 tackles or whatever. He still was a very good player for this Bears defense, but he makes a lot of mistakes in run defense. I mean, he really does. And he shot the wrong gap. The Ravens ran counter to the left. He attacked off the defense's left side, the offensive right side. He went to the backside, but the Ravens pulled blockers from the backside to the front side to create that extra gap where Roquan Smith was supposed to be. And so it's frustrating when we treat Roquan Smith like he's this all-pro Hall of Fame linebacker right now, and he still makes a lot of those mistakes in run defense. It's not just the game-winning touchdown play for the Ravens, but we see that a lot, throughout the rest of the game where he'll just shoot the wrong gaps in running plays. Great job being athletic and making tackles. Very valuable, important part of this defense. Great. He's a good linebacker. But I mean, if we want to hold him to this standard of Brian Urlacher, Lance Briggs, all pro dominant linebacker, then just do your job on the most important play of the game that scores the game-winning touchdown for the Ravens. I mean, that's where I'm stuck at. Like, if we're just gonna say Roquan Smith's a good linebacker, then yeah, good linebackers make mistakes all the time. Totally fair. All pro elite linebackers that are, this pantheon that Roquan Smith is in, all pro elite linebackers don't miss that play in that moment, in that type of situation in the game, right? That's where I want to hold Roquan Smith accountable. If we're going to level of price on him, then let's hold him to that standard when he does make some of those mistakes. Because otherwise, he had a strong game. He made a bunch of tackles, although some of those tackles were already positive plays for the offense. And tackles are not a perfect measurement of linebacker performance. Sometimes it's cleaning up mistakes from other players, but he had good tackles for loss, good plays in coverage, 100%. Run defense is still a work in progress for Roquan Smith, and that's okay. That's totally okay. It's just, I think it's an important thing to point out if we're going to just heap all the praise on Roquan Smith. Let's make sure he's actually earning that praise and not making mistakes on the most critical game-winning touchdown plays of the game. Regardless, that's how the Bears gave up the touchdown drive. And so much of that is on Kindle Vildor. And I feel bad for Kindle Vildor being kind of constantly beat up on in that spot. And he's put in such a difficult spot in this stage of his career. But that's on Ryan Pace then too, for trusting Kindle Vildor there, for the Bears not having great other options. And he has played better in some of these games. And one drive at the end of the Ravens game is not a referendum on his career necessarily, but it was a struggle. And it was an advantage that the Ravens found. And I don't blame Kindle Vildor solely for the loss, although it's hard not to blame him solely for that potential game-winning touchdown drive at the end there. But like we talked about on yesterday's podcast, your defense holds another team to 16 points. That should be good enough to win most games. And your offense scoring 13 is definitely the bigger sin in the bigger picture, even if that last touchdown drive is definitely uglier than a lot of the rest of the game felt like. But it just kind of added the list of Bears mistakes throughout this game and things that I definitely kind of start to attribute a little bit more toward coaching staff problems. We'll look at just like the little things that keep going wrong that we saw a lot of in this game that you kind of point back to Matt Nagy and this coaching staff next on Locked On Bears. I was holding on there, but I could feel my throat going to me on that one. It was rough, but I made it through. See, the people that just listen to just the podcast version of the podcast, I edit this kind of stuff out, but we do this live in video format, so I appreciate you bearing with me as I try not to choke as I was getting through the end of the segment there. But this episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at BetOnline AG, the number one place we trust and the number one place we recommend for all of your sports betting needs. Looking ahead to our Thanksgiving game, Bears at Lions. Bears are favored by 3.5, despite now Andy Dalton expected to make his return to the starting lineup against the Lions, who may also be without Jared Goff. But I'll tell you what, if you want to make your Thanksgiving football watching that much more exciting, BetOnline is the place to do it. They've got not only pro football and college football, but NBA, college basketball season underway, plus NHL, boxing, UFC, and so much more. Even online Vegas casino games. Great way for you to take advantage of all their amazing offers, not only for this Thanksgiving weekend, but the rest of the 2021 season. Sign up today for a free account and enter our promo code Locked On, and you're going to receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit, giving you free money to play with and win at betonline.ag. They are stuffed with deals this Thanksgiving. We heard the Fire Nagy chants rain down in the Bears-Ravens game. I had seen where the Fire Nagy chants came down at the United Center during a Bulls game as well. And then the chants came down during a high school football game where Matt Nagy's son was playing. And that's where I'm going to draw the line. I mean, let Matt Nagy's son have his moment in high school and not be chanting out firing his dad while he's trying to play Illinois high school playoffs, or I don't even know where they are exactly in their season. But I mean, come on, let's leave Matt Nagy's son alone. He's a kid. He's, 17, 18, 16. I don't know how old he is. He's a teenager. Let's not drag his kids into his dad's mess. It was the same thing with like Mark Trestman and his daughters. And some people would be like tweeting them. And it was a weird it's a weird thing, right? Like leave the dude's family alone. It's the football head coach. It's not more. It doesn't have to be more serious than that. But regardless, right? There's this animosity is growing toward Matt Nagy, and I think the Ravens game, not only is the loss itself frustrating, but it's some of the things within the loss that you just don't see good, well-coached football teams make some of the same mistakes. It's just like the little things that, like, it's not the difference between the wins and the losses, but it's enough where you just point at the coaching staff. Like, this is like, you have not that you have one job, but like there are certain aspects of the game that is purely on the coaching staff. Like, for example, clock management and timeouts. And I want to get into those here as we get into the segment. That it's like, when they take a bad timeout or they burn a timeout or whatever, like, there's no one to blame besides the coaching staff, specifically the head coach. But then, the head coach is also supposed to have people on the sideline in the booth that are helping him with clock management situations. Or if he doesn't, he certainly is allowed to. Some teams do. And there's no salary cap on coach salaries to have as vibrant of a staff as you want. I mean, I'm sure there's rules, but it's not like there's a financial reason. So, like, it's little things like that. Or like, first play of the second half, right out of the locker room. You've had the whole halftime to figure out what you want to do. The Bears have a false start. You can't get the snap count right on the first play of the second half. There was another play later in the game, as we'll get into the timeouts more specifically, but out of the second timeout, they had a false start. Out of a timeout, you don't see really good, well-coached teams have false starts out of timeouts. They have false starts. Every team makes mistakes. Every team has penalties. No team is so perfectly disciplined that they never mess up in that way. And that's totally, that's a reality. But it just seems like with the Bears and with Matt Nagy and with other poorly coached teams throughout recent history, you have those signs of poor discipline or just poor, I don't know, it's like attention to detail. And so much of that, like, is a reflection of how the coaching staff drills some of those things to make sure that every player makes sure that they're on the same page, right? It's not like it's one player who keeps false starting because he's just an idiot or he's lazy or he's sloppy or whatever, right? I mean, like, it's spread across a bunch of different players on offense. It's not just the same guys having the same penalties over and over again. And it's such one of those, like, frustrating things that, again, the Bears didn't lose because of their false starts, but it's a sign of, like, the messages not getting home or just players not being totally locked in and dialed in. And that it seems like, the Bill Belichicks of the world have their players so much more disciplined and more dialed in, generally speaking. But, like, you go through the timeouts in this game. The Bears get into 4th and 1. The punt team comes out. The Bears call a timeout. Then you see, well, Matt Nagy's headset went out. And yes, that's not Matt Nagy's fault that his headset stopped working. And presumably, I mean, electronics on the sideline just stop working sometimes in NFL games. It happens to even the good, well-coached teams. But then, after the timeout, they come out in the offense back on the field to go for it. And Matt Nagy kind of said afterward that, we took that timeout so we could discuss it and decide and figure out that we wanted to go for it. But the previous play was 3rd and 1. And first of all, regardless of what the play call is on 3rd and 1, if you're in 3rd and 1 at midfield, you need to know whether you're going to go for it on 4th down. You have to be thinking a play or two ahead. I mean, that's just what NFL play callers and coaches do. Even Matt Nagy has talked about that before, about trying to, you're thinking a play or two ahead as the play caller on what you want to do, regardless of if this play is successful, we're going to do this. And if this play is not successful, we're going to do this. And so how are they not already certain before they even snap the ball on 3rd and 1, what they're going to do if that play works and if that play doesn't work, right? That's just like coaching 101. High school coaches, high school football coaches get to 3rd and 1 and already know, okay, am I going to punt or am I going to go for it if we don't get this 3rd and 1? I mean, that's just like day one stuff. And for the Bears to have to call a timeout to communicate that, to change their mind it's inexcusable. But then on top of that your 3rd and 1 play is a deep shot, which, they took a vertical shot downfield that falls incomplete. It was in the 4th quarter with Dalton. I don't remember specifically which one, if that was the one that Mooney couldn't keep 2 feet in bounds, or regardless, they took a shot on 3rd and 1. Typically, you take a vertical shot on 3rd and 1 when you know you're going to go for it on 4th and 1 because you're in 4-down territory. So we can say, you know what, if we don't get this one, we'll have another shot to get 1 yard. So we might as well take the shot there. But to take the shot and then not be ready, even without the headset, they still sent the punt team right on the field. Like, he's standing next to Chris Tabor, the special teams coordinator. He's got his offensive coordinator in the booth. They should have been talking about it ahead of time that we're going to go for it on 4th and 1. And maybe you call the timeout because you can't get the play call in or whatever, but Nagy's not the play caller. But at the very least, you send your offense out there. Dalton even said after the game, like, the punt team was going out, and so that's what we were going to do, right? They were clearly planning to punt the ball there and then change their mind after the timeout. I mean, it's just those kind of frustrating things. And then the play call itself, 4th and 1, you go to David Montgomery in the Wildcat offense. Matt Nagy said that was the play they practiced for short down situations, and so it wasn't like it was some spur-of-the-moment trick play decision. But that's the play you chose to practice on 4th and 1? Get Andy Dalton under center and run a gosh dang QB sneak. I was about to get more vulgar, but just run a QB sneak at 4th and 1, right? When you put Dave Montgomery at the quarterback spot in shotgun, when you snap the ball to him, he's 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage. And he has to run 6 yards to get the first down on 4th and 1, right? Or if you go under center and say, hand it off to him, then he's taking the handoff 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage. He has to run 3 yards for a first down, right? I mean, it's just, I get that there's 4 tight ends on the field, so you're supposed to have extra blockers in there, and maybe he should have bounced outside, but Tony Romo stopped the replay early. If you watch the broadcast, he's trying to say Montgomery should have bounced outside. You rewatch that play, the tight end's getting beat to the outside. Montgomery bounced it inside. I mean, he had nowhere to go on that play. But if you have Montgomery in the Wildcat, there's no threat of pass. The whole defense knows you're going to run the ball. You're telling them what your play call is before you call the play, and you're putting David Montgomery farther away from the first down marker. I mean, it's simple stuff, right? Don't make it harder than it has to be. And it just feels like with some of those play calls, the 3rd and 5 toss and the Wildcat on 4th and 1, you're making it more difficult on yourself. Like, football, this is my favorite saying, and I've grown to appreciate it more and more as I've called play-by-play for football games and spent a lot of time with football coaches, right? Football is a simple game made complicated by coaches. Put it in the I formation, hand it off to the fullback, get him as close to the line of scrimmage, or run the sneak. You just need 1 yard. You don't need a touchdown. You don't need 10 yards. You need 1 yard. Just get the 1 yard. It's a simple game made complicated by coaches. And Matt Nagy makes that so clear on those types of plays. It's just so frustrating. But the other timeouts, I mean, real quickly, it was 4th and 6. Incomplete pass on 3rd and 6. Clock stops. Simple situation. Bears are going to go for it. Big 4th down. They get the offense lined up. They kind of late. They call timeout because the play clock's running out. The clock had stopped. You had the normal operation time of 40 seconds. Wasn't anything running extra or there wasn't any kind of delays of any other reason. They just couldn't get the play call in and get lined up on time. And I get it. Like, it's a key situation. You want to call the timeout to get it right. But again, it doesn't seem like teams like Bill Bell, I keep going back to Belichick because he's kind of the golden standard, but well-coached teams don't seem to have to do that as much as it feels like the Bears do. And then after that timeout on 4th and 6, Jason Peters false start, 4th and 11. I mean, again, good teams don't false start out of timeouts. It just doesn't happen. Then the 3rd timeout, Bears score the go-ahead touchdown. They come out with the PAT team, the extra point kick, call timeout, go for 2. Coaches know if we score the touchdown here before they score, are we going for 1 or are we going for 2? You always see the coaches hold up. They hold up the 2 fingers, right? Immediately after the touchdown. The camera cuts to the coach, and he's holding up 1 finger or 2. They know right away, based on the game situation. High school coaches know right away, based on the game situation, you're going for 1, you're going for 2. Bears come out with the PAT. They realize, oh, crap, we should go for 2. Timeout, redo it. And then they take the roughing the passer penalty to go from the 2-yard line to the 1-yard line instead of taking on the kickoff. And it's all those things, right? Individually, none of those led to the Bears losing the game. Collectively, I don't know if any of those mistakes, if those timeouts were the reason the Bears lost, probably not. The Wildcat play on 4th and 1, is that why the Bears lost the game? Probably not. None of these things directly lost the game for the Bears. But it all feels like things that point at the coaching staff and only the coaching staff that they just can't get right. And it's the little things that's like teams win and lose in the margins sometimes. It's like that's where the Bears are having a direct disadvantage as a result of their coaching staff. And it's frustrating. And it's why Bears fans are chanting fire Nagy and why it's ready for the Bears to change out their coaching staff, change out their general manager, and kind of restart with Justin Fields as the future. That's where we're finding our optimism moving forward here throughout the rest of the season. We probably won't get to see Fields, it sounds like, on Thursday against the Lions, but we will get to see him at some point later this season and keep kind of watching that development grow and some of the other younger players on both sides of the ball. There's a lot to keep in mind. We talked about it on the podcast during the bye week, why there's still plenty to watch for the rest of the season. So if you start to lose that hope or lose that optimism for this Bears team, or just kind of wonder like, oh man, do I care about the rest of the season? Go back and listen to that, because that's why you should care about the rest of this season. That's why you should keep tuning into Locked On Bears for all of your daily in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. We are free and available on all platforms, so make sure you hit that subscribe button, however you're listening, or if you're watching on the YouTube channel especially. It's the best way to keep up with everything we are putting out your way. With the Thanksgiving game, it's kind of a condensed game prep schedule for us. I don't know if we'll have a direct Thanksgiving Day podcast. I mean, we like the holiday too, so it'll be a little bit of a shorter week as well for us. But hey, we'll make sure you're ready for Thursday's game. We will break down Thursday's game afterward. And most importantly, we'll make sure you're ready to bear down.